Good evening. You'll notice a little different background here than our usual Tuesday night stuff. I am alone tonight. My partner Kevin is under the weather, so he should be back with me next week. He's got a no. He don't have. He made it very clear he does not have coronavirus, but he has some kind of flu-like thing, and they told him to lay low until Wednesday, which is tomorrow. So uh, just a shout out, Kevin, if you're watching. We I miss you and wish you well quickly. All right. If you notice, also we're changing the subject matter here tonight: conspiracy theory or conspiracy fact. You know, the shows we do, we of course we're always talking about haunted dolls and other haunted stories. Kevin and I, over a period of time, have shared a lot of stories. And that is fine. I love these subjects, but I also like conspiracy theories. And since I am doing this by myself tonight, yeah, we're gonna delve into conspiracy theories and conspiracy fact. Now this is important, and I'm gonna play a video in a little bit about the coronavirus for things for you to think about, because there may be more to the story than what you've been told by mainstream media. So I want to go along with a couple of things here. We're going to talk about several different conspiracies, if you will. One is chemtrails, and there's this debate, and some people that my opinion is, some people think they've already got the answers to all this stuff, and they steer clear of anything that is questionable. I have a problem with that, because throughout the history, and we're just talking about the United States right now, things tend to get ignored because of our refusal to question, and because the government and the media has effectively taken this conspiracy theory and labeled it in such a negative way that people, no, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But it's not. If it's a conspiracy fact, then guess what? It's not a theory. So talking about chemtrails, let's start there. And there's a fact right here. 1950s, St. Louis, certain neighborhoods, the Army sprayed these neighborhoods with a toxic aerosol, and this was revealed in 2012. After all this time, Army's secret chemical testing in St. Louis neighborhoods during the Cold War is now raising new concerns. This is back again in 2012. Doris Spates was a baby when her father died inexplicably in 1955. She has watched 4 siblings die of cancer, and she survived cervical cancer herself. She recently learned that the Army conducted secret chemical testing in her impoverished St. Louis neighborhood at the height of the Cold War. And now, of course, she wonders if her own government is to blame for this cancers. So the story is, and this is a fact, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is a conspiracy fact. In the mid-50s, and again a decade later, which would take you into the 60s, the Army used motorized blowers atop of low-income housing high-rises and at schools and from the backs of station wagons to send a potentially dangerous compound into the already hazy atmosphere in predominantly black areas of St. Louis. Now, I want you to think back for a minute, because this is well before, a good decade, in the 60s anyway, before we had the EPA that started cleaning the air up. And that's why it says already hazy air in these cities. Local officials were told at the time that the government was testing a smoke screen that could shield St. Louis from aerial observation in case the Russians attacked. Oh boy. But in 1994, the government said the tests were part of a biological weapons program, and that St. Louis was chosen because it bore some resemblance to Russian cities that the U.S. might attack. Oh. The material being sprayed was zinc cadmium sulfide, a fine fluorescent powder. New research is raising greater concern about the implications of those tests. The St. Louis Community College Merrimack sociology professor Lisa Martino-Taylor's research has raised the possibility that the Army performed radiation testing by mixing radioactive particles with this zinc cadmium sulfide, though she concedes there's no direct proof, but there is suspicion. Her report, which was released, this article is going back to 2012, was troubling enough that both U.S. senators from Missouri wrote to Army Secretary John McHugh demanding answers. Aides to Senator Claire McCaskill and Roy Blunt said they received no response. Army spokesman Dave Foster declined an interview request from the Associated Press, saying the Army would first respond to the senators. The area of the secret testing is described by the Army in documents obtained by Martino-Taylor through a Freedom of Information Act request as a densely populated slum district. About 3/4 of the residents were Black. So now Spates, now 57 and retired, was born in 55 and delivered inside her family's apartment on the top floor of the since demolished Pruitt Ego housing development in North St. Louis. Her family didn't know that on the roof of the building she lived in and was born in, the Army was intentionally spewing hundreds of pounds of this chemical into the air. Now, this wasn't from airplanes, I grant you that, but there are other cases that came from airplanes. California's one, Georgia's another. 3 months after her birth, her father died. 4 of her 11 siblings succumbed to cancer at relatively young ages. So clearly, she's wondering if it got into the system. When she heard about the testing, I thought, oh my God, if they did that, there's no telling what else they're hiding. No kidding. The Army admitted to using these blowers to spread this chemical. Brenda recalled a summer day playing baseball with other kids in the street when a squadron of Green Army planes flew close to the ground. So they did use planes there too, dropped a powdery substance. She went inside, washed it off her face and arms, and went back out to play. Over the years, Brenda has battled 4 types of cancer: breast, thyroid, skin, and uterine. And so anyway, the secret testing in St. Louis was exposed to Congress in 1994, prompting a demand for a health study, a committee of the National Research, so on and so forth. So just want to make really clear what's going on here. That's just one thing to think about. So people that don't think the government could be spraying something in the atmosphere, they don't know anything about what's already taken place by the government, not just our government. This is nature of governments. They will use humans as guinea pigs, entire neighborhoods, and so forth. Back during Prohibition, it was theorized for a while that the government poisoned alcohol during Prohibition. Just like marijuana and other drugs, just because the government made it illegal didn't mean that people stopped drinking during the Prohibition. But those who chose to get tipsy started dying. And of course, from that, accusations flew that the government was poisoning alcohol to enforce Prohibition. When the government puts poison into alcohol, a large percentage of which the government knows will ultimately be consumed for beverage purposes, such action is reprehensible and tends to defeat the very purpose of Prohibition. A 1926 issue of the Camden Morning Post opined. A number of people, including a senator, put the blame for the deaths firmly at the hands of the government and said that the practice was essentially legalizing murder. In fact, the government was poisoning alcohol and freely admitted to it, and even published an entire short book on the subject. However, according to the government, the purpose wasn't to enforce Prohibition, but for federal revenue purposes. Booze meant for consumption would have to be taxed, but denatured booze was tax-free. In 1906, Congress passed the first tax-free denatured alcohol act, which was designed to safeguard industries that required industrial alcohol. In order to keep supplying the industries that required alcohol, the government began to denature the alcohol adding something to make the alcohol unfit for consumption, to make it wholly unfit for beverage purposes. After reports of several deaths in the 1926 holiday season, the poisoning became an increasingly controversial tactic, though the government denied they were denaturing of alcohol had anything to do with it. According to a 1929 congressional record, an expert who testified regarding the deaths in New York City said there was not the slightest evidence adduced at any point, so far as I'm aware, that these deaths were caused by industrial alcohol, either in the form in which it was denatured under government supervision or after it had been manipulated by criminals. Instead, the expert said, the deaths were caused by drinking straight wood alcohol. The thing that kills the unfortunate who in his craving will drink anything is the alcohol itself in its raw state. It's hard and raw and disastrous in its effects on the stomach. So they made excuses on it, but they did admit to poisoning alcohol. Interesting stuff here. People are chipped, or who are chipped can be tracked by satellites. Well, this came out in Detroit Free Press in the 90s in a publication called Relevance. Conspiracy theorizing, if you want to call it that. This is when the first conversations came about biochips, and that they would emit low frequency FM waves that could travel great distances, several miles over space to orbiting satellites. Transmission would provide information on the exact location of the chippee. Interestingly enough, just 3 years later, 1998, a professor of cybernetics at Reading University in England named Kevin Warwick received a chip implant, which, according to a contemporary Independent article, emits a unique identifying signal that a computer can recognize to operate various electronic devices. Now, I remember when this came out, room lights, door locks, and lifts. And this, of course, in that time was a long ways off from that conspiracy theory about satellites. But fast forward to 2018, the Atlantic reported on a group that is working on making GPS-enabled chips to track relatives with dementia. In the future, there might be GPS tracking for other groups, something that was dismissed as a paranoid disorder just a few decades ago. Fascinating stuff. We can go on and on with these subjects. So I want to hope, bear with me. Right here, and some of this happened in my lifetime. And when I cover this, and then we're going to come up to today. Bring it up, but this is not ancient history. But let's just cover the top 10 government experiments that our government has done to our citizens, us. So at the top of the list, number 10, in Alabama, I want you to note, and most people may know, the Tuskegee syphilis study. And the U.S. Public Health Service conducted the Tuskegee syphilis study beginning in 1932. A total of 600 African-American men were chosen to be involved in the study, 399 with syphilis and 201 without. Those with syphilis were denied proper treatment for the disease. The government wanted to ensure that they were able to track its progression without interruption by medication. The men were never given the option to participate in the study because they were never told it was an experiment. The experiment was only supposed to last for 6 months, but it became a long-term study that lasted up to 40 years. When syphilis became the main drug, when penicillin became the main drug to treat syphilis, the patients were denied access and weren't given the option to opt out of the study. In exchange, they were given free medical exams and burial services. A lawsuit was later filed, and the government granted free burial services to all surviving patients. Oh my God. Okay, so that didn't end until about the year I graduated, somewhere around 73, 72, 73, somewhere around in there. It finally ended. All right, so next in this line of things our government has done, if you don't think that something, people lived in denial in those days. You don't think you can live in denial today? Look at this Stateville Penitentiary Malaria Study. The Stateville Penitentiary Malaria Study was conducted by the U.S. government in the 1940s at Stateville Penitentiary, which is located in Illinois. It involved over 400 prisoners who were illegally infected with malaria and subjected to studies. The goal was to test experimental drugs in an effort to find a cure for the disease. In addition, the tests were administered and documented solely by the prisoners themselves. Not only were they the patients, they were also the proctors. The prisoners also decided which of them would take part in the experiment. The testing process counted toward their sentence and allowed some to serve much less time. The prisoners would also choose who was eligible to receive a reduced sentence. However intriguing this may have been for the prospective patients, the experimental drugs often had irreversible side effects. One of the most famous prisoners involved in the experiment was Nathan Leopold, who many may recognize from the Leopold and Loeb murder case in 1924. He stated that the prisoners would often deal with the horrifying side effects without complaint. Despite the immorality of the experiment, it was praised by many for the benefits it would create for study. Citizens saw it as a sacrifice to find the cure for malaria at the prisoner's expense. Oh, aren't we lovely people? Number 8. Navy-sponsored beef blood transfusions. Beef blood transfusions. Edward Cohn, a biochemist working at Harvard University, conducted an experiment in 1942 with sponsorship by the U.S. Navy. The Navy had contacted Cohn to engage in this secret project to discover a possible biological weapon. His work involved injecting prisoners with cow blood in an effort to detect a protein that could be used in the event of an upcoming war. The 64 subjects who were injected with the cow blood all suffered catastrophic effects, ending in their deaths. Although the government experiment ended in failure, it was soon learned from Cohn's methods that the true way to identify the protein was not in cow blood, but in human blood. The methods were replicated using human blood, and the protein was not only isolated, but it was also pure. Instead of being used to harm others, the protein was later used to effectively treat shock patients. Cow blood, beef blood transfusions, supported by our government, the U.S. Navy. All right, here's another one, and I don't know, so you may have heard this one, plutonium testing, number 7. During the 1940s, the U.S. was busy with the Manhattan Project, the effort to create the atomic bomb. Because the effects of the radiation from the bomb were largely unknown, the government spent years studying them, including with experimentation on its own citizens. Plutonium is one of the many radioactive materials the government used in these type of tests. Patients would receive doses of radioactive plutonium in the form of injections. The majority of these patients were terminally ill, which made the results of the experiment difficult to fully understand. They were never told what was being done to them, partly because the word plutonium remained a government secret until after World War II. Although most of the patients did not die from the effects of the plutonium injections, the government's secrecy and willingness to subject its own citizens to such experiments certainly raised suspicion. World War II, the mustard gas experiments. It goes on, my friends, it goes on. During World War II, the U.S. government conducted many experiments on its own soldiers to test the efficiency of gas masks and protective clothing. It's estimated that nearly 60,000 human subjects were used during the studies, mostly Caucasian men. However, many Japanese and African Americans were also used to identify any possible skin differences with the experiment. We're pitiful. There were several different tests used to determine the strength of such protective clothing in both gas chambers and in the field. Field tests involved releasing the chemicals in an open area outdoors using human subjects to test particular clothing items and monitor the effects of the chemicals that they had on nature, such as on animals and water quality. There's also evidence that some of the soldiers were not offered any protective gear or clothing. In chamber tests, troops wore the mask and clothing that stood in the deadly gases for 1 to 4 hours. The tests were repeated daily using the same people as subjects until they exhibited dangerous reactions to their exposure. Okay. Next, Operation Paperclip. The U.S. raced against the Soviet Union to attain as many Nazi scientists as possible before an impending war. The many advances German scientists had made, including synthetic rubber and much more, led to them being the most sought-after researchers. If the U.S. could employ these scientists, they could use their intelligence to develop many more advancements, ensuring national security if the Cold War were to escalate into another world war against the Soviets. The U.S. paid Nazi scientists to work for the government, providing them with immunity from prosecution for their offenses following World War II. This immunity allowed them to escape jail and possible execution. The U.S. government also offered to care for the scientist's family if they agreed to work for them. Originally, only rocket scientists were wanted, but the U.S. eventually employed up to 1,600 Nazis up until 1990. These actions were highly illegal and remained extreme government secrets for years. Operation Sea Spray. September 1950, the U.S. Army was involved in a secretive experiment to test the possibility of biological warfare near the West Coast. They did so by releasing biological weapons into the streets of San Francisco to test their effects. They released a type of bacteria to gain information on how it would affect the population. This was done without the citizens' consent. By the end of Operation Sea Spray, 6 different biological warfare tests had been performed on the residents of San Francisco. These releases killed many people and hurt many more. The government then concluded that it's very likely for a coastal city to be affected by such warfare. Jeez. One of the many deaths caused by this experiment was Edward Nevin. He died after bacteria from the government testing spread from his urinary tract to his heart. Other cases soon followed him, but many were cured after long, torturous hospital stays. Are you following? I hope anybody that's watching, I hope that you are really, really following this. Because if you think that something could not be going on, you're wrong, and you could be dead wrong. Operation Big Buzz. The catastrophic experiment conducted by the U.S. government in 1955 may not seem as harmful as it really was. The government released millions of Aedes mosquitoes, let's put it that way. I can't pronounce the Latin name they've got here, known to carry yellow fever, into Georgia parks. The bugs quickly dispersed into the suburbs. The goal was to determine how effective insects could be in biological warfare by tracking biting habits on citizens. Although these mosquitoes weren't infected with yellow fever, the government still tested the potential for biological warfare by experimenting on its very own citizens, with the people of Savannah, Georgia being the target. It is also recorded that government officials disguised themselves as health care officials in order to effectively record the mosquito bites and track their locations. Many other experiments similar to Operation Big Buzz were also performed, such as Operation Dropkick and Operation Big Itch. Operation Dropkick is very similar in that they both tested mosquitoes in Georgia. Operation Big Itch involved the government releasing fleas into the public to study their biting and travel habits. Like the goal of Operation Big Buzz, Operation Big Itch was meant to determine how effective fleas would be in spreading disease in biological warfare. All these studies show the government's determination for developing advanced biological warfare methods. We're going to move forward here, okay? Willowbrook experiments. This is a very extremely shocking thing that took place. These experiments were aimed, the Willowbrook experiments were aimed at discovering a cure for hepatitis. The continuous study lasted from 1956 to 1970. The subjects were taken from Willowbrook State School, which is located in Staten Island, New York. They were mentally handicapped children. The series of tests involved injecting the children with experimental drugs that were meant to cure hepatitis. Not only were the children unable to provide consent, but they would often die from the treatments. When questioned about their actions, officials justified themselves by stating that hepatitis was prevalent in the institution and nearly all patients would become infected anyway. I don't know how else to get this. I mean, are you listening to this? Is not ancient history. This is less than 100 years old. The children who did not contract the disease naturally were infected by the administrators to carry on this experiment. The children, mentally challenged kids. 1990 to 1991. Hey, anybody my age out there that were very much adults in the 90s? Did you know about the measles vaccine experiment? Oh boy, I don't want to get the vaccine anti-vaxxers here, but I can understand why we're suspicious. Not all is bad in the vaccine world, but there has been some ugly things done. 1990-91, a measles vaccine was conducted by the Centers of Disease Control, CDC. Doctors wanted to know if they could use it to replace natural antibodies in babies. To test this, doctors injected thousands of babies in the third world with the drug. Third world, we're always going to poor, underprivileged people, where it be prisoners, whatever. The vaccine eventually led to several immune problems in the babies, and it caused many deaths, although the exact number was never known. Knowing the drug had this effect, the government still tested on African American and Hispanic babies in Los Angeles. They injected more than 1,500 babies in the United States with the experimental drug. However, the study came to an end when it was discovered that African children were dying at an alarming rate up to 3 years after receiving these vaccinations. You see, and you wonder why people are anti-vaxxers. When you know these things have taken place, it scares the hell out of you. I'm not promoting being an anti-vaxxer. I've had vaccines, but this you got to stop it. You got to think. The CDC later admitted that the parents were unaware that their children are being injected with this experimental drug, and that had not yet been verified by the FDA. This is what we're dealing with, and these kind of things go on and on, and you can study this out for sure. That's just a brief overview of some things that you may or may not have known about just in the last century, and that's just what we know about. I remember the first half of the last century, a common practice was a lobotomy, a frontal lobotomy. They would sometimes go in through the eyeball to puncture the brain, or they would drill a hole in the skull. There were different ways of doing it, and that was considered a modern practice of medicine. The difference being that those people who had enough sanity would have some kind of clue, their families would, I guess, but so many of these things took place unbeknownst to the subjects, the victims. This spraying in the atmosphere, and people say, "Oh, that's condensation." I beg to differ. I know flight patterns. Number one, I used to fly a small plane. I know flight patterns, and I know condensation. I understand how this works. I know how it is affected. So the whole situation is that if you think that people that question these things and ask these questions and don't trust are off their balance and overly paranoid, you haven't paid attention to what our government's done. And this is just our government. We're not talking about other governments. I mean, I would say the majority of governments on the planet have been guilty of similar practices over time. But this is our government. We'll just focus on us right now, okay? Alabama, just down the road, every time you go to Auburn, you go right through Tuskegee. In my lifetime, I was a senior in high school. And that was going when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State under Obama. She publicly came out to apologize to the Guatemalans for us doing the same thing that we did at Tuskegee Institute. We moved that program down to Guatemala. And now we treat these people as illegals. I mean, come on. The point is that questioning is a good thing. Now, I know, like my friend Trish here, who at least was on there watching, she had enough sense to question religion, the Bible, the beliefs in God, and that sort of thing. She had enough sense to do that. But we reached this threshold where we just, why don't you carry that questioning on to other things? You don't have to be overly paranoid. In fact, there's not being overly paranoid when you've got valid reason to be concerned. If you are in a relationship with someone, a lover, and you find out that they have been secretly poisoning your drink or putting something in the atmosphere, you're going to keep this relationship up? You're going to keep trusting this person? But yet we're doing this with our government. It's like they admit they poisoned the alcohol. They sprayed stuff in the atmosphere in more than one city. They did all these experiments, and that's not, and what I shared just now is just a portion of what is proven. I'm not talking about conspiracy theory. We're talking about conspiracy fact. Huge difference. This is fact. Provable, admitted fact. There's no question. Nobody's saying that's outrageous to think that our government did that. Nobody's saying that. They did that. If you had a relationship with someone and you found that they were coming in your apartment, your house, and they were secretly emitting some chemical into your apartment without telling you, or if they were giving you a pill saying this is a vitamin and really it's a contaminated something, or maybe you've got a disease and they're just giving you a sugar pill and saying, here, take this, and let's, are you still going to trust this person? Are you still just going to sit back and you're going to say, well, that was back then. I'll give old Bob, Bob's my man. I don't think so. Now let's fast forward to coronavirus. I'm not suggesting anything except to question. That's it. So as this coronavirus thing has been exposed, it started spreading like wildfire. We learned some things belatedly as it's taken place. We learned, number one, that there's two of these laboratories over here um, that play around with different viruses. So that was kind of something, and that hit the news. I mean, it goes away real quick. It's like, oh, it's there, and then shoot. Um, I've dug and dug. I found out that on January the 28th, which is a few weeks old now, news. It wasn't in the headlines anywhere. You had to dig for this stuff, and it's like, dang. So January the 28th, a Harvard professor and two Chinese nationals are arrested because they've got something going on with this Wuhan, China laboratory. And according to what the lab is saying, according to what the Chinese are saying, and the defense is something to do with, oh, he was hired to develop a battery for electric vehicles. But there's nothing in this scientist research ever, and those that were intimate with him, nothing there to do with batteries. He's totally unrelated to batteries. And so there's questions. And these are worthy questions. Why do we want to wait until a bunch of people die? Why do we want to wait until a generation later for these things to be exposed? It's good to ask questions. It's good to be inquisitive, to do your homework. It's good to get better opinions than just from government sources, let's put it that way. Even though this arrest about Dr. From Harvard there, even though I'm sorry, it's not funny, but it's just, this is in our face stuff, and we just have a tendency to ignore this. So given that, I want to take on something here and play a video. And in this video, let me find it here. Bear with me a minute. Okay. I got too many things open here, so I'm gonna flip through this. God almighty, how many pages I got open? I gotta find the right one to share with you. I got to 10 steps. That's where I'm looking for. 10 steps to survive a global pandemic, the coronavirus. So where is this video? Bear with me here. I'm sorry. I'm doing this alone here, and I can't find it. That's pandemic ready. Where is this? Well, this is insanity. I got too many pages open. That's just the short and long of it. Just the short and long of it. Okay. Oh my goodness. I guess I'm not going to be able to do this because I can't freaking find it. I can't freaking find where this is. I've even got a page open to where the house that Kevin's looking at buying. Okay. I tell you what I do want to share here. Well, no, I don't. This is crazy. Hold on. I'm going to back up for this a minute. Just bear with me. I don't know where this is, but I'm going to see if I move this page. Come on. Let me see if I can get this. I can't, I got to go through a certain process to share this, and I want you to watch this video. Okay. So, see if that made a difference in me. There we go. Now I've got it. Okay. Here we go.
Today we're going to talk about the potential for a widespread deadly pandemic and what you can do to prepare for it. Let's get to it. The Global Preparedness Monitoring Board is an independent body assembled by the World Health Organization. They indicate that there is a growing risk of a worldwide pandemic that will kill tens of millions of people. This type of pandemic could occur naturally, or it could be a bioweapon that was deliberately created. It could even be accidentally released from a research facility. Managing a disaster of this nature is not as simple as managing a benign threat like a hurricane, a cyber attack, or a direct attack on critical infrastructure. The effects of pandemic are far-reaching and prolonged. The gradual collapse of social systems could last months, even years. For this reason, preparing for the next great global pandemic involves serious planning and a long-term commitment that goes well beyond the 72-hour emergency kit. Factors that are making a pandemic of this magnitude more likely are the following: crowded living conditions in urban areas, the increased amount of research on pathogens, thus the increased potential for a mistake to be made in one of these laboratories, the growing risk of bioweapons, and a global transportation grid which moves billions of people around the world at faster speeds every year. While there are these increased risks, there are also some protective factors in the modern age. We now have better detection systems, and we also have prophylactics and better treatment methods, and we can also develop vaccines faster. What kind of features would a super virus like this have? Well, for starters, it would be airborne. That means it can spread through microscopic droplets in the air from person to person. It would be highly contagious during the incubation period. That is the period in which people are not symptomatic, or when they just have mild symptoms. This allows it to spread under the radar. It would also be a microbe that most people are not immune to, so there would be a large population of susceptible human hosts. It wouldn't have an existing treatment or prevention method, and it would have a very low but significant fatality rate. Now, that last one might sound surprising, but consider that the Spanish flu only had a kill rate of 2.5%. This is important from the virus perspective because it allows it to spread longer before killing the host. Nearly 50 million people perished as a result of the Spanish flu, so a virus needn't be very lethal to be disruptive. So when you hear talk of viruses with high lethality rates, this actually may be inhibiting the spread of that particular virus. There is something called the host density threshold theorem, and this is that if a virus kills too many people, it will run out of susceptible hosts and it will quickly be extinguished. How do we assess the threat level of a pandemic? It's important to keep in mind that on average in the United States, the flu kills 30,000 people every year. So while we're seeing these coronaviruses and respiratory illnesses, which indeed are novel and unpredictable, it's just important to keep the numbers in mind before we jump the gun and batten down the hatches and everybody calls in sick for work. For instance, as bad as SARS was, it infected 10,000 people and killed 800 people. As tragic as it was, it didn't entail the end of the world as we know it and was far from being an existential threat to humankind. Now, the media tends to do one of two things. News agencies tend to overestimate the threat in order to attract eyeballs. Government agencies, on the other hand, are tasked with maintaining social order, and they want to minimize panic, and thus they may actually downplay the seriousness of the threat, especially the credible ones. If the government knows that the crap is going to hit the fan, the last thing they want everybody to do is start losing it and panicking, because that makes it much harder for them to maintain the social order. And this makes perfect sense because a breakdown in law and order and people not partaking in society may actually have profoundly negative effects, not only on the economy, but it may actually make the spread of the virus even worse. This is why the recent coronavirus in China has prompted the lockdown of several major cities in that country. These cities are under quarantine, which is essentially a form of martial law. All transport systems have been temporarily suspended, and people are being prohibited from leaving these cities. Cordoning off large areas and quarantining whole cities will be something that's implemented worldwide should a virus get out of control. These drastic measures speak to the potential severity of this current outbreak. While something like this might be easily executed in China, many democratic countries around the world will be far more resistant to the idea of quarantining whole cities. The threat of being contained against your will in an area that's ridden with illness isn't going to go over well in a lot of places. Many people would try to get out of Dodge. Furthermore, the logistics of pulling something like this off would require immense government resources that most countries, especially during these crises when they have public workers going AWOL, they're simply not going to have the manpower. The Chinese city of Wuhan, where the outbreak was first discovered, is also home to a research laboratory which studies these types of lethal pathogens. If something has escaped this laboratory and the Chinese government has compromised the economy to the extent that it has by shutting down these major urban centers, they must understand the true gravity of the situation. Is this current version of the coronavirus actually a serious threat, or is it being overhyped in the media? Only time will tell. Regardless, we are long overdue for a pandemic of historical proportions. Something to ask yourself is, if a lethal pathogen for which there was no cure was detected and spreading within your city, would you go to work? How many people who work in occupations for which the general public relies would not go into work? This, of course, would be a threat to the stability of our critical infrastructure. Would the government step in then and mandate people to go back to work? Would civil unrest then ensue? Now, there have been some plans by certain governments to provide essential government workers with prophylactics or give them priority treatments so that they can come to work and not worry about getting sick. While the government might view this as a utilitarian argument, the general public may not, and they may in fact protest this. Once again, this could lead to civil unrest. So depending on the length of the disruption of critical services, this could lead to food shortages, power outages, and increased crime, all of which may inadvertently accelerate the spread of this pathogen. How would we prepare for a pandemic of this magnitude? Generally speaking, all of the strategies that we discuss on this channel would apply. Having the appropriate provisions to ride out a 6-month to 1-year societal slowdown caused by a pandemic will greatly reduce the amount of situations you have to put yourself in to surround yourself with compromised people, whether that's going to a crowded grocery store or standing in a lineup to receive government rations. In addition to this, you'd also obviously want to avoid socially congested areas in times of heightened pandemic risk. Airborne droplets from contagious people can travel several feet, so the last place you want to be is utilizing public transportation. Avoiding touching things while you're in public spaces, and depending on the severity of how widespread it is, you may want to use proactive or reactive methods to avoid contracting the illness. A proactive method would be using a N95 mask or an antiviral mask. Most people, unless we're at DEFCON 1, aren't going to be comfortable wearing a half-face respirator or a gas mask around town. A reactive approach would be aggressive and frequent hand washing or carrying around a bottle of hand sanitizer. If a major outbreak does occur, chances are it's going to spread via the major cities of the world first, ones that have international airports. From there, it will diffuse throughout the population. Many rural, isolated communities may altogether avoid coming into contact with these types of pathogens, simply by virtue of the lack of their transient populations. One protective factor of the modern world is that a lot of things nowadays are hands-free. Whether it's just having to tap your debit card, doors that you don't have to open, or paper towel dispensers that you just wave your hand in front of. This type of technology doesn't get enough props for limiting the spread of pathogens, but it's certainly not enough to stop a major pandemic from spreading. Now, a fomite is defined as objects or materials which are likely to carry infections, such as clothes, utensils, and furniture. Fomites act as a medium to transport pathogens from one person to the next. Touchless technology has significantly reduced the amount of fomites within society, but not nearly enough to eliminate the virulent spread of a dangerous disease. In terms of preparedness gear, N95 or N99 masks, which block out 95 to 99% of infectious particulates, can be useful and have been shown to significantly reduce the risk of contracting an illness. Perhaps more importantly, if you are infected, it will minimize the risk of spreading the disease to others. However, the effectiveness of this low-level protective equipment requires a tight seal, something that's impossible with these types of masks. And these masks should be immediately disposed of once you're done using them, because the virus can attach to the exterior of the mask, and then when you take the mask off, you are at risk of coming into contact with the pathogen. Antiviral face masks, on the other hand, do actually neutralize the viruses that come into contact with them. But once again, these do not form a tight seal around the face, and thus there is the potential for airborne particles to enter into your respiratory system. Half masks and gas masks offer much better protection. Half masks are far more cost effective, but they don't offer any eye protection. Gas masks are much longer lasting and they offer better protection. There's also more filter options. Many are CBRN ready, meaning that they resist against chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear contaminants, but they certainly cost a lot more. A half mask with good medical goggles is certainly better than nothing. If you do have to engage with sick people or you have to enter a contaminated space, you'll need some sort of protective suit. There are 4 levels of hazmat suit protection. For most pandemic situations, level C will be sufficient. Level C consists of a Tyvek suit and a half mask. Level B consists of a sealed suit with a gas mask, and level A is a fully sealed suit with a self-contained breathing apparatus. Level C is going to be within the means of most people and drastically reduce the chance of contracting an infection. Level B offers even more protection, and level A, total protection. I've done an extensive video on hazmat suit protection that I'm going to link here. Generally speaking, for pandemic preparedness, disposable Tyvek coveralls, long latex gloves, duct tape, and a respirator will significantly reduce the risk. I would also recommend storing Pool Shock. This is a chemical agent that's used to purify the water in pools. Basically, it allows you to create bleach. You can use that bleach to disinfect potentially contaminated areas. If you are using a level 2 suit like the Haz suit, then you're going to need a decontamination procedure for this suit. That would have to consist of decontaminating the suit with bleach after you're done using it. Another essential part of your preparedness kit should be biohazard bags and biohazard stickers. This is a great way of identifying and making others aware of biohazardous materials. It's important to identify potentially hazardous material, as viruses can stay active on surfaces for days. In addition, in times of the breakdown of rule of law, these can also be used as threat deterrents, because even the dumbest of thieves is likely going to want to avoid a potentially contaminated area during a pandemic. Other useful tools are contactless infrared thermometers like the ones they use in airports, air purification for your home like HEPA filtration systems. It's also a known fact that viruses don't like humid environments. Keeping the humidity in your home between 50 to 60% can reduce the survival of viruses in the air and on surfaces by 30%. Ultraviolet light can also inactivate viruses. Having ample amounts of food, water, vitamins, anti-diarrhea medication, and medications to help to control the symptoms of these illnesses like Tylenol could be profoundly useful, if not life-saving. You may also want to keep some 4mm plastic sheeting and ample amounts of duct tape in your pandemic preparedness kit. It's very likely that a family member or somebody that you know and love is going to contract the disease. You're going to have to be able to deal with that situation when it arises. You'll have to find a way to care for them. The Urban Prepper did an excellent video on this topic, and I'll post a link in the description below. And lastly, and perhaps most disturbingly, but this is a reality that we'll have to face, you may be tasked with disposing of those who've passed away. You may be burdened with the task of doing this in a sanitary way, which is not going to increase the risk to you or your community. This is because government services may be overwhelmed and may not be able to assist with this immediately. Hopefully you're never faced with a situation like that, but I'm going to post a link to a video in the description that walks you through what you should do if you are presented with that. I'm going to post links in the description to different items that you can use to build your preparedness kit. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching Canadian Prepper Up. The best.
I hope you noticed that the one thing that you could take away from that video, very important. A lot of good tips there, hopefully. That I really want you to think about at the beginning. If you saw the beginning of that video I just shared, it's on YouTube, by the way. And I will, when I get through, I'll go ahead and post that video so you can review it. It leads to some other videos that could be beneficial. But you'll notice the one thing it says at the very beginning about the government, even though the government may not be doing anything nefarious, they still are not going to give you all the information. They're going to downplay it. And that in itself can have horrible results. I've often looked And I know that Laura Sword lives along the coast there, where she deals with hurricane activity. And I never could understand. Well, I know the financial reasons. I get that. But you're coming up, you can see the weather maps, you see what's building up, you can see the potential of it hitting along the coastline where you live, and you know what these evacuations are about, you know how it clogs up the traffic. When you start relying on the government to say, leave, you see what I'm saying? Instead of taking your own initiative to say, hey, I got some experience. I understand that we're going to be evacuating. So I can avoid all the bull. I can make sure I get a Motel 6 way up, 300 or 400 miles inland and not have to wait. Or I can get to Grandma's or Uncle Bob's or wherever I can go to, or even just to a rest area somewhere, or take a tent and camp out somewhere, whatever. Sure. we depend on the Weather Service for these reports. And I don't depend, like in Birmingham area, we got this weather god, James Spann, who has totally, at least twice, grossly, in just a few short years, I don't pay a lot of attention to it, but I know 2 times grossly got it wrong, dealing with snow and dealing with tornadic activity, because he's an entertainer and people don't get this. I'm not saying that he's a bad person. I'm just saying you have to take them for what they're worth. So anyway, I'm going to share that video. There's a lot of things that you can get out of there. And I'm also going to be promoting my book at the end of this, and some follow-up books to go with this very subject. That's not the purpose of this. We're dealing with conspiracy theory, and more than that, we're dealing with conspiracy fact. So I want to go back for those who still are afraid to question whether our government's being honest with us, whether our government would do anything ugly, nefarious, harmful to us or not. Let's look at some other events in brevity that our government has been involved in. 1942, a federally funded study that began in 1942 injected experimental flu vaccine in male patients at a state insane asylum in Michigan, then exposed them to the flu several months later. Jeez. We're gonna give you this vaccine. We think it might work, but we don't know. But we're gonna give it to you, and then we're gonna wait a little while, and then we're gonna give you the flu. Okay. Some of the men weren't able to describe their symptoms, raising serious questions about how well they understood what was being done to them. One newspaper account mentioned the test subjects were senile and debilitated. Then it quickly moved on to the promising results. All right. In a federally funded studies in the 1940s, noted researcher Dr. Havens Jr. exposed men to hepatitis in a series of experiments, including one using patients from mental institutions in Middleton and Norwich, Connecticut. Havens, a WHO World Health Organization expert on viral diseases, was one of the first scientists to differentiate types of hepatitis and their causes. Purposely exposed human subjects to hepatitis. A search of various news archives finds no mention of the mental patient study, which made 8 healthy men ill but broke no new ground in understanding the disease. Again, in the mid-40s, researchers studied the transmission of a deadly stomach bug by having young men swallow unfiltered stool suspension. The study, conducted at New York State Vocational Institution, a reformatory prison in West Coxsackie, the point was to see how well the disease spread that way as compared to spraying the germs and having test subjects breathe it. Chemtrails, anybody? Wake up, wake up. Don't say it's impossible. Don't say it's not being done. It's been done in the past at many different levels. Swallowing it was a more effective way to spread the disease is what the researchers concluded. The study didn't explain if the men were rewarded for this awful, horrible task. Oh, University of Minnesota study in the late 40s injected 11 public service employee volunteers. Well, we covered this one earlier, malaria. And then starved them, more detail, for 5 days. Some were also subjected to hard labor, and those men lost an average of 14 pounds. I could use that one. Whew. They were treated for malarial fevers with quinine sulfate. One of the authors was Ansel Keys, a noted dietary scientist who developed K rations for the military and the Mediterranean diet for the public. But a research of various news archives found no mention of this study, which it was real. Then a study in 1957, the Asian flu pandemic was spreading. The federal researchers sprayed the virus into the noses of 23 inmates at a prison in Maryland to compare their reactions to those of 32 virus-exposed inmates who had been given a new vaccine. Government researchers in the 50s tried to infect about 24 volunteering prison inmates with gonorrhea using 2 different methods in an experiment at a federal penitentiary in Atlanta. The bacteria was pumped directly into the urinary tract through the penis. God, this is horrific. This is Dr. Frankenstein stuff. This is horrible. But this is our government. This is what we did to each other. So even though some of these studies describe the candidates, if you will, as volunteers, historian and ethicist questioned how well these people actually understood what was going on with them. It's like when you go to a doctor and you can't understand everything the doctor's trying to tell you. Prisoners have long been victimized for the sake of science. Dr. Joseph Goldberger, remembered as a public health hero, recruited Mississippi inmates to go on special rations to prove his theory that the painful illness, pellagra, was caused by a dietary deficiency. The men were offered pardons for their participation. But studies using prisoners were uncommon in the first few decades of the 20th century and usually performed by researchers considered eccentric even by the standards of that day. One was Dr. L.L. Stanley, a resident physician at San Quentin Prison in California, who around 1920 attempted to treat older, devitalized men by implanting in them testicles. Listen to this, Doctor. I'm going to say this again, and I want you to listen very carefully to what this Dr. L.L. Stanley, a resident physician at the San Quentin Prison in California in 1920, did to these older, devitalized men, which basically saying devitalized meant that they could not reproduce and maybe had ED. You ready for this? He attempted to treat older, devitalized men, and it's not funny. I just cannot help but I don't know how else to react to it. 1920 attempted to treat older, devitalized men by implanting in them testicles from livestock and from recently executed convicts. Transplanted freaking testicles from animals and the cadavers of executed convicts. Interestingly enough, the newspapers at that time wrote about Stanley's experiments, but there was a total lack of outrage. It reminds you of some stuff that goes on today that people just, can't be bad. It's sponsored by our government. It's happening to prisoners. It can't be bad. Enter San Quentin Penitentiary in the role of the fountain of youth, an institution where the years are made to roll back for men of falling mentality and vitality, and where the spring is restored to the step, wit to the brain, vigor to the muscles, and ambition to the spirit. All this has been done and is being done by a surgeon with a scalpel. Begin one rosy report published in November 1919 in the Washington Post. Line up and get your new testicles from who knows what, the billy goat, pig, I don't know, it doesn't say. Or that recently executed, I don't know what they used to use the electric chair a lot, so what did the electric chair do with the electricity? What did that do to those testicles? I just don't know. Around the time of World War II, prisoners were enlisted to help the war effort by taking part in studies that would help the troops. For example, a series of malaria studies at Stateville Penitentiary. We've talked about that before. It's about this time that prosecution of Nazi doctors in 1947 led to the Nuremberg Code, a set of international rules to protect human test subjects. Many U.S. doctors essentially ignored them, arguing that they applied to Nazi atrocities, not to American medicine. If it's American, it can't be an atrocity, right? You gonna line up and get your testicle implants from God knows what kind of animal. Late 40s and 50s saw a huge growth in the U.S. pharmaceutical and healthcare industries, accompanied by a boom in prisoner experiments funded by both the government and corporations. By the 60s, at least half the states allowed prisoners to be used as medical guinea pigs. Two studies in the 60s proved to be turning points in the public's attitude toward the way test subjects were treated. The first came to light in 1963. I was about 10 years old. Researchers injected cancer cells into 19 old and debilitated patients at a Jewish chronic disease hospital in New York borough of Brooklyn to see if their bodies would reject them. Cancer cells. Let's give you some cancer and just see, you're old, you're debilitated, see if your body will reject these cancer cells. The hospital director said the patients were not told they're being injected with cancer cells. There was no need. That's what it says. There was no need. The cells were deemed harmless. But the experiment upset a lawyer named William Hyman, who sat on the hospital's board of directors. And the state investigated, and the hospital ultimately said any such experiments would require the patient's written consent. Well, that's about damn time, huh? At nearby Staten Island from 63 to 66, a controversial medical study was conducted at the Willowbrook, which we talked about that already. The children who were mentally retarded kids were given hepatitis orally and by injection to see if they could then be cured. Oh, God. And then, of course, we know the Tuskegee experiment that came to be revealed publicly in 1972, just a year before my high school graduation. It proved to be the Holy Trinity that sparked extensive and critical media coverage and public disgust. And of course, then we get to this syphilis study in Guatemala that Hillary Clinton, when she was working in the Obama administration, had to publicly apologize. So by the 70s, some of these experiments involving prisoners was considered scandalous and widely covered congressional hearings in 73. Pharmaceutical industry officials acknowledged they were using prisoners for testing because they were, here we go, prisoners were cheaper. Prisoners were cheaper than chimpanzees. Oh, God. I'm going to die. Lord, and it's not funny. I can't handle this any other way. The Holmberg prison in Philadelphia made extensive use of inmates for medical experiments. Some of the victims are still around to talk about it. Edward Youssef Anthony, featured in a book about the study, says he agreed to have a layer of skin peeled off of his back, which was coated with searing chemicals to test a drug. And his compensation for having his layer of skin removed from his back and then coated with this burning chemical in order to test a drug, he was given cigarette money. He said, "Oh my God, my back is on fire. Take this shit off of me." Anthony said in an interview with the Associated Press, as he recalled the beginning of weeks of intense itching and agonizing pain. The government responded with reforms in the mid-70s. But as our government clamped down on this, at least publicly, keep this in mind, this was never greatly advertised, it just slowly exposed itself. But our government started clamping down on the use of prisoners and so forth. Well, that didn't stop it. The use of mental patients, the use of prisoners, that dried up. So we started going to other countries. Clinical trials could be done cheaper. It's just like buying stuff from Japan or China was cheaper than buying it here, manufactured cheaper. It was easy to find patients in these other countries who were not on any medications. And if they were not on any medications, it was made it easier to test the drugs they want to test on them. Ethical guidelines have been enacted, and few believe that another Guatemala study could happen today. It's not that we're not infecting anybody with these things. So this is where we're at, and all I can do is say over and over, if you think that this is old hat, you just don't have a clue. Hello, Kevin. I guess you're still here with me. It's just wild. It is just really, really wild what we have done and continue to do. Now, I know this is a far take from where, we normally have been going with this show. But since I'm here by myself, I wanted to cover this subject, and given what's going on with the coronavirus, I think it's important that we delve into this a little bit, to remind ourselves that if you trust these authorities, whether it be a doctor, whether it be a politician, whether it be the government, the U.S. Navy has been involved, the U.S. Air Force has been involved, our government's been involved, major institutions, universities have been involved, and I want to go back to coronavirus, and I'm not, this happened on January the 28th, and I've covered some of this before, but I want to go over this. We have a Harvard scientist that was arrested and is accused of lying about his ties to China. And this happened on, again, the 28th of January this year. Charles Lieber, the chair of Harvard University's Department of Chemistry and Chemical Biology, keep that in mind, the chair of Harvard University's Department of Chemistry and Chemical Biology has been arrested and criminally charged with making false, fictitious, and fraudulent statements to the U.S. Defense Department about his ties to a Chinese government program to recruit foreign scientists and researchers. He's also accused of lying about a lucrative contract that he signed with this Wuhan University. Now, the interesting thing about this is, let's go back here again. He is the chair of Harvard University's Department of Chemistry and Chemical Biology. But when you follow this story, they're trying to make the claim that his involvement with this laboratory in Wuhan had to do with the development of a battery for electric vehicles. And you got to search to find this, but it is there. this started back a few years ago, and they were searching for a lot of students from around the world to and anyway, bottom line is that he, according to his peers, those intimately familiar with Dr. Lieber, it just kind of is mind blowing because he had no connections whatsoever with anything to do with battery, and very strange. And again, you go back here, and it just is not hitting the news. It's kind of hitting the news a little bit more now than it was. Some of us have been drawing attention to it. I'm not the only one. And all of a sudden, we have come to Wuhan, China, something we've just never heard of before, or most of us not familiar with. This is where this coronavirus came from. It's where it was given birth to, I guess, and spread from. And the first thing we find, and it barely hit the news, it was there for 5 seconds and whoop, vanished, was that there's 2 of these university labs over there that's working in stuff that could be coronavirus related. Now, I want to go back and I want to share this with you. The claim was by China and so forth. There's supposed to be the claim made that he was involved with these labs in Wuhan because of developing battery for electric vehicles. The battery angle kind of it creates a puzzle. That's because a search of the titles of Lieber's more than 400 papers and more than 75 United States and Chinese patents reveals no mentions of batteries, vehicle, or vehicles. He's co-authored 412 research papers and has 65 awarded and pending U.S. patents. And he's had 11 Chinese patents. In fact, one U.S. nanoscientist and former student of Lieber says, "I have never seen Charlie working on batteries or nanowire batteries." He asked that his name not be used because of sensitivity evolved around Lieber's case. And then it gives a little background on Lieber's work at Harvard. And is there any connection to Lieber and coronavirus? I can't say. It is interesting and it's fascinating. It's I think it really something to question. You know, I believe it should be questioned. And that's not to say, I'm not sitting here even going to come close to suggesting that I've got the answers. I don't have the answers. I'm nowhere near. But I know the more that I look into this kind of stuff, the more questions come about. And if you go back through history of all these things we've been talking about with our experiments that our government's done on people, you've got to understand that you can't take things at face value. You cannot go through life and you cannot sit there and say, "Oh, that's outrageous." You can't do that. It's just in our face. Like I said, Tuskegee Institute. This is not ancient history. And when you say chemtrails, people, oh gosh, that's condensation, you know. But yet we have valid proof. We have admitted proof in several states across our great country. Indeed, they have sprayed um, stuff in our atmosphere. And they always attack impoverished areas. They attack the poor. They go after prisoners. They go after people that have no means. It's tempting for these people to get involved in stuff. Well, prisoners are desperate for the most part, right? So it's like, oh yeah, sign me up. If I get a chance to cooperate with the government, maybe I get out of here early. Save me some pain. Not knowing what they're subjecting themselves to, not knowing how this is presented to them. And throughout history, I mean, the literacy rate of some of these people, and their understanding, what happened in St. Louis and these ghetto-like areas that using basically fans on top of these high-rise buildings that house these poor people and blowing this crap into the air without telling these people, even driving station wagons around the community. This is fact. This is not a conspiracy theory BS. This is fact, provable, admitted fact. It's just like the fact that during Prohibition, our government poisoned alcohol that caused the deaths of many people. And if we have a history of this, and all of a sudden you think, oh well, this is 2020. This is not going to happen in my lifetime. Really. I'm sure that I remember when it was 1960, we thought we had it going on. It was running right into the era of the space age, and Wernher von Braun is part of that paperclip project. Illegally, what they did to get those German scientists, we didn't want Russia to get them, so we grabbed them. The Saturn V rocket was built, and we're headed to the moon, and we're doing all this wonderful stuff, and we were on top of our game. But in the middle of us being on top of our game, we got this crap going on. If it wasn't with the Tuskegee Institute, it was with this group over here, with these inmates over here, with these poor people in St. Louis, with these people, all these mosquitoes being released in Georgia. There's names for all this stuff. It's real. And this is the problem that people are having. It is not fake. It's genuinely all real. So I can't say today what is the government's lying about. And even if the government is not doing anything nefarious, keep this in mind. Maybe the government's not doing anything intentionally, putting something in the atmosphere or doing anything nefarious like that. Maybe they're not. But maybe, and I we got this thing where we withhold information. And that withholding of information or disinformation can be as deadly as putting something in the atmosphere, injecting these retarded kids, mentally ill kids with hepatitis. We did this. This is not a joke. This is not made up bullshit. This is real. You think just because we moved into the 20th century that all of a sudden we woke up and we became this saintly nation? And we became this good people? My God, look how we retaliated to 9/11. We didn't care. We bombed Iraq. Didn't matter if they were women, children, babies. We maimed. We screw them people. We're vicious. We're vicious animals. What we'll do to each other. I mean, you go on and on with this kind of stuff. So anyway, there's kind of the rundown on this. It's not pretty. It's just not pretty at all. We're coming into I want to just go to a little twist on all this, because we have a great issue with poverty in our nation, and the things we've talked about, it's always the poor of the poor who's affected the worst. And well, that's too long. I don't want to go into that one. I want to, let's see, here's one that's about the right length, and this is just some good information. Let's just put it that way. So I'm gonna let y'all watch this for about 15 minutes or so and give my voice a break from this. So bear with me as I get this lined up here. Hold on. This will be worth your time to watch this right here. Let me see if I got the right one here. Yes. Gotta double check that before I start clicking the wrong buttons here. Okay, enjoy this.
Preparing for CBR defense is one of the most terrifying topics in the world of emergency preparedness. CBRN stands for chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear. It represents the protective measures taken in situations in which those hazards may be present. During the Cold War days, this was referred to by the term NBC, which stands for nuclear, biological, and chemical. It has since been replaced by CBRN, with the addition of a new threat, radiological, meaning a radiological weapon such as a dirty bomb. These topics are truly horrific, whether they be used as weapons of war, terrorism, or even by human error. Yet, this topic is one that I had not prioritized highly in the past. Not that it was not important. After all, being in the Seattle region, I am just a 3-hour drive away from the Hanford nuclear site in eastern Washington and a 2-hour drive away from Satsop nuclear power plant in Elm, Washington. Just across the Puget Sound, the third largest U.S. Navy base located on the Kitsap Peninsula in Washington state features one of the U.S. Navy's 4 nuclear shipyards and one of 2 strategic nuclear weapon facilities. With the horrific disasters that occurred at Chernobyl nuclear power plant in 1986 and most recently in 2011 at the Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan, these potential hazards are lurking a little too close for comfort in my region. The reason I had previously not prioritized this higher in my family's emergency preparedness planning is that it was almost impossible to find a cost-effective way of protecting my children from the threat of CBRN. There just weren't very many options for CBRN or NBC protective suits and masks specifically made for children. The only options were expensive solutions that were typically reserved for the children of wealthy Russian citizens or royalty. For the past several years, this has been my holdup from becoming better prepared for CBRN hazards and attacks. How could I purchase high-quality protective hazmat suits and masks for my wife and myself if I couldn't do the same for my children? They depend on me for their safety. I just couldn't do it from a moral standpoint. This has been my dilemma for years now. However, I am happy to inform you that thanks to the company Mira Safety, those days are over. Mira Safety is leading the charge in offering civilians professional-grade CBRN protection, such as hazmat suits and gas masks for everyone, including youth and infants. They even offer solutions for small pets as well. This has been a game changer for my family's CBRN preparedness measures. After watching the popular HBO series Chernobyl, my wife asked me, the urban prepper, how our family's nuclear preparedness measures were looking. After I said, not good, she told me to get on it right away. So just like Mickey from the movie Rocky II, I excitedly sprung up and said to myself, well, what are we waiting for? I had numerous discussions with Roman, the founder and CEO of Mira Safety, about his own personal family protection measures and modeled my family CBRN kit off of the lessons that I learned from him. Roman's family originated from close to the Chernobyl disaster area and has deep knowledge in this subject that has been invaluable to me. In this video, I will show you my new family CBRN kit that features CBRN protective suits for each member of my family, in addition to some shared items. I am currently storing my family CBRN kit in my color-coordinated storage bins, which I covered in a previous video. I keep these color-coded bins, which leverage the concept I call the color of prepping, on shelves in our garage. This helps me keep all of my home preparedness supplies organized. Since the items in this kit are protective suits, I have these stored in a purple bin. In the color of prepping, the color purple represents the preparedness category for clothing items. I have a family of 4, including myself, my wife, my son, and my daughter. Rather than store everything in one large bin, I've modularized my family kit and have each family member's kit stored in their own insulated, reinforced grocery bag. Each bag is labeled with an ID tag. This will hopefully allow us to easily identify each family member's CBRN protective clothing quickly in case of an emergency. As always, I've created a PDF that you can download by clicking the link in the description box below. It has a list of all of the items that will be covered in this video. It also includes hyperlinks to each product that you could select if you'd like to purchase the item for yourself. I've included links to the exact sites that I purchased the items for myself. Mira Safety was kind enough to send me 2 of the gas masks and 2 of the HAZ suits for review purposes. Once I realized how awesome these products were firsthand, I purchased the remaining items for the other members of my family immediately. Lastly, I just want to state that I am by no means an expert in this field. The items selected for this kit were selected based off of numerous discussions I've had with Roman from Mira Safety, tons of online research, discussions with people who frequently use CBRN protective equipment for their line of work, and through inspiration I've obtained by watching shows like the HBO series Chernobyl, the movie Contagion, and more. You should definitely do your own research regarding this topic to figure out what would work best for you and your family's preparedness measures. Finally, let's get started with this video featuring my family CBRN kit. Let's start off first by going through all the items in the adult CBRN kits for mom and dad. The first item being the Mira Safety CM6M Tactical Gas Mask Full Face Respirator. This is a fantastic professional CBRN defense and emergency preparedness gas mask. It's been previously reviewed on my channel. It comes standard with a speech diaphragm, drinking system, and canteen. The butyl rubber face seal offers superior protection for CBRN agents. It's used by police forces, special operations, and CBRN specialists worldwide. Highly recommended. To go along with the gas mask, we also have the Mira Safety CBRN Gas Mask Filter NBC77 SOF 40 millimeters. These NATO threaded filters are pricey, but have an unbelievable 20-year shelf life and are specifically tested with the CM6M gas mask for certification. They feature military spec filtration technology and protect from a wide range of harmful and highly toxic substances, including CBRN agents. Due to the individual price, I recommend purchasing one of Mira Safety's packages that include the CM6M gas mask system in addition to 2 of the NBC77 filters. The next item is the Mira Safety HAZ Suit Protective CBRN Hazmat Suit. The Mira Safety HAZ Suit is used extensively by major fire departments for hazmat response, major hospitals for emergency preparedness first responders, major chemical companies for a wide range of potential hazmat exposures, and most branches of the U.S. military Department of Defense. They're hand-stitched in the USA, and the fabric is made from a durable, puncture-resistant film composite with an excellent barrier to over 125 chemicals, including chemical warfare agents and toxic industrial chemicals. The Mira Safety HAZ Suit is one of the world's only hazmat suits offering a wide range of sizes, fitting children as young as 4 years old, and is designed to withstand long-term storage conditions without degradation in performance over time. The Mira Safety website provides a detailed information on the size guide and the chemical warfare agent data that this HAZ suit protects against. For boots, I'm going with the Ranger Overboots by Honeywell. The Ranger supersized rubber overboots offer full protection over leather work boots, protecting them from harsh environments, and is specifically designed for chemical protection. The vulcanized rubber construction prevents seams from leaking, which provides waterproof protection. So again, these go over your regular boots. The next item are the MCR Safety Chemical Resistant Gloves. The MCR Safety Chemical Resistant Gloves offer outstanding personal protection for various applications, from hazardous material and chemical biological response to laboratory, petrochemical, agricultural, and aerospace applications. The rolled gauntlet cuff extends protection to wrists and the forearms. They are resistant to most acids, alcohols, bases, esters, and ketones. It has excellent chemical permeation resistance as well. Stored with each CBRN suit, I have a packet of the Iostat Potassium Iodine 14 tablets. Potassium iodine is a salt of stable, not radioactive iodine that could block radioactive iodine from being absorbed by the thyroid gland, thus protecting this gland from radiation injury. The thyroid gland is the part of the body that is most sensitive to radioactive iodine. There are 14 tablets in each package of Iostat, which will protect one adult for 2 weeks. New FDA guidelines call for the daily administration of one Iostat tablet, which is 130 milligrams, for adults and children over 18 years old who weigh more than 150 pounds. Each Iostat tablet provides 24 hours of protection. Next, I have a Liberex hair clipper, battery operated. In order to achieve an ideal gas mask seal, it is best to have a clean shave. This inexpensive electric hair clipper runs on a single AA battery, so you don't have to worry about charging it. While I would shave during an actual emergency, I'm not going to do it now for the sake of this video. To go along with that hair clipper, I've also included a travel razor blade and travel shaving cream. Again, this is to ensure that I get a proper gas mask seal. And last, I've included some nitrile gloves. It is recommended to wear an extra pair of gloves underneath the primary gloves to avoid spreading contamination when removing the CBRN protective clothing. My wife's CBRN kit basically matches mine, although it's tailor-fit for her particular size. It also doesn't include all of those razors, shaving cream, and the hair clippers. Now let's move on to the youth CBRN kit that I use for both my son and daughter. Starting off first, we have the Mira Safety CM2M Child Gas Mask Full Face Protective Respirator for CBRN defense. This is the same gas mask design that was used to save thousands of lives during the Chernobyl incident. It is the only children-sized full-face gas mask on the market that fits kids from 1.5 to 15 years of age. It is designed to filter out a full spectrum of CBRN agents, helping your child survive a disaster. It is made from durable PMK-S rubber construction, the same type used in Russian military masks, and uses the same 40mm NATO filters as the larger gas masks for interchangeability. The CM2M children's gas mask is available in 2 sizes. Size 1 is for kids 1.5 to 6 years of age, and size 2 is for kids 6 to 15 years old. To go along with the mask, we also have the Mira Safety CBRN Gas Mask Filter NBC77 SOF 40mm. Again, these NATO threaded filters have an amazing 20-year shelf life. They feature military-spec filtration technology and protect from a wide range of harmful and highly toxic substances, including CBRN agents. The CM2M gas mask features a long hose that filter attaches to. While you can just carry the filter, it's probably better to use Mira Safety's pouch that you could have the gas mask filter just rest in. You could also drape it around your shoulder and just store it in your backpack. Next, we have the Mira Safety HazSuit Protective CBRN Hazmat Suit. Again, the Mira Safety HazSuit comes in youth sizes, which is awesome. Youth large is for kids 4 foot 2 inches to 5 feet, or 60 to 90 pounds. Youth small is for kids 3 feet 3 inches to 4 feet 2 inches, or 35 to 60 pounds. I'm not aware of another company that makes a hazmat suit for kids of this quality. For gloves, I'm going with the Honeywell North 13 mil unsupported butyl glove size 7. These chemical-resistant butyl rubber gloves are available in kid sizes. They are made in the USA, are highly flexible, and puncture-resistant. Butyl rubber has excellent impermeability and works great for this style of CBRN protective gear. Next, I have the Chemix Stomp Rain Boot for toddler, little kids, and big kids. While it's difficult to find a professional-grade CBRN boot for youth, this Chemix Stomp Rain Boot is 100% synthetic rubber, good quality, and should protect from most hazards outside of mustard gas. In each one of the kids' storage totes, I also have a package of Iostat Potassium Iodine 14 tablets. Children from age 3 to 18 years old who weigh less than 150 pounds should take half a tablet. Children from age 1 month to 3 years should only take 1/4 tablet. And infants less than 1 month old should only take 1/4 tablet as well. If necessary, children too young to take solid food or unable to swallow a tablet could take Iostat TM dissolved in a liquid, such as chocolate milk, or in a soft food such as applesauce. I've also included a package of Bubble Glove Kids Nitrile Gloves. The Bubble Glove is the first and only kids disposable nitrile gloves in North America with high quality material from Japan, so it's not made in China. They are specifically designed and manufactured for kids 5 to 12 years old. They are 100% latex-free, powder-free, and non-fragrant. They're FDA 21 CFR approved and have passed CSPIA 208 test. Again, these are the backup gloves that you use when taking off the suit to help avoid spreading contamination. And last, I have a Stars and Stripes do-rag. This particular one is made by Ergodyne. It's the Ergodyne Chillets. The Mirror Safety Kids gas mask has rubber straps instead of the elastic straps used on the adult CM6M gas mask. Both of my kids complained about it pulling on their hair and hurting, so I decided to pick up a few of these do-rags. They are quick drying, super absorbent, and comfortable. The remaining items in my family CBRN kit are community items, so we share them. The first being the Kapler Chem Tape chemical resistant tape. It's 60 yards in length and 2 inches wide. It is designed specifically for protective apparel and related applications. Chem tape provides the added assurance you need for taping gloves, boots, respirators, and storm flaps. It's also excellent for shelter-in-place applications. It's kind of pricey at almost $40, so for this particular video, I just used normal tape for the video segments that you've seen. In a true CBRN emergency, I would use the Kapler Chem Tape. The next item is a book. This is the U.S. Armed Forces Nuclear, Biological, and Chemical Survival Manual. This is an awesome book that I also have on my Kindle device in addition to Amazon Audible. This manual will show you how to protect yourself during a chemical or biological attack, recognize the indicators of nuclear, chemical, and biological attack, develop a simple and effective family action plan, guard against radiological effects of a dirty bomb, assist victims of nuclear, chemical, and biological agents, and also provide guidance for assembling and storing everyday materials that could save your life. Again, this book is highly recommended. The reinforced grocery bags that I'm using are the NZ Home Extra Large Insulated Reusable Grocery Bags. They have reinforced no-tear handles and are made of extra strength thermal materials. So far, they've worked really nice for my CBRN kit. You've probably noticed that I haven't talked about a Geiger counter yet, even though I had an old school one featured in this video. I'm still in the process of saving up for a high-quality Geiger counter, but Mirror Safety also offers a solution for this. This is the Mirror Safety Geiger One Portable Dosimeter Geiger Counter. The Mirror Safety Geiger One Portable Dosimeter Geiger Counter allows you to check radiation levels in your home, food, water, and surroundings. It uses the same SBM21 Geiger molar tube as military Geiger counters. Stay tuned for a product review of the Mirror Safety Geiger One Portable Dosimeter Geiger Counter. Coming soon. And that concludes all of the items that I store in my family CBRN kit. I keep this storage bin stored in the shelves in my garage in case of an emergency. I hope that you guys enjoyed watching this video. Finalizing this kit has brought me a little bit of peace of mind. It feels good knowing that each member of my family now has a protective CBRN suit. Hopefully this is just all a big waste of money and I never have to use it.
I'm talking, my microphone is not unmuted. Sorry about that. I think you can hear me now. So I want you to hold a thought, what you just watched. And now I want to bring some balance into this whole picture about the coronavirus. And I want you to realize how we are trained to just start accepting something as natural. And this is sad because, we're watching this coronavirus thing happen, but there is a more widespread disease, virus, that goes from state to state. It's infected some 26 million Americans so far. And we have grown to accept this, and it kills. It's the flu, influenza. It's not a new pandemic. It has been here, and it is still here. It's killed already this season alone 14,000 Americans. The 2019-2020 flu season began September 29th. It's projected to be one of the worst in the decade, according to the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. At least 250,000, a quarter of a million people have already been hospitalized with complications from the flu. And that number is predicted to climb as the flu activity swirls. This is really sad. Even the low-end estimate of deaths each year is startling. The CDC predicts that at least 12,000 people would die from the flu in the U.S. every year. Now let's go back to the 2017-2018 flu season. The 2017-2018 flu season, just a couple of years ago, some 61,000 people died from the flu. 45 million were sickened. So I wanted to bring this out very, very strongly because we get caught up in the hype of this coronavirus. And I'm not discounting this coronavirus, but we have normalized this thing and we start to accept things. And it's I mean, like the big thing now, and it freaks me out, is like, I made this comment before, I guess, how lucky I am that about everyone in my age group, in my peer group, in my age group, has already had some form of open heart surgery. It's become a normal procedure. There are things that we can do to forestall all this stuff. Now, I've never had the flu vaccine. I'm 65. I've never taken the flu vaccine. I've never had the flu. I guess I'm just a lucky one. One thing for sure that I believe that's helped me in this is I don't work in an environment that puts me around a lot of people every day. We send our kids to school. I'm 65. I haven't had kids in my life in forever. And we put them in these tight buildings. When I went to school, we had windows that opened. We had fans and windows. We didn't have central air. So we had outdoor fresh air circulating in the building. We weren't in this trapped environment, even though they've got these filtration systems, blah, blah, blah. I think there's several things that take place here. Plus, I think we've over-sanitized our lives. Our immune systems, I think, have gotten weaker. Beyond all that, though, we have normalized things that we should not normalize. It should be unacceptable. We're going ape shit over coronavirus. It's in the news. There have been 2,000 people die from it. But we accept the fact that the flu kills tens of thousands every year. 250,000 people are infected with it. And we just accepted, you get your flu vaccine. Well, even with the flu vaccine, we still have problems, don't we? How many people you know that have had flu vaccines, and each year it's like, oh, the flu got tougher. The vaccine didn't affect this flavor of the flu. The vaccines are not a cure for a guaranteed fix on any of this either. So all that said and done, we need to take care of ourselves instead of depending on government and these institutions to do this for us. And this has been my soapbox for a long time. I've been totally independent for as long as I can. Yes, I do have people close to me, very, friends, not government agencies. I'm not running to these agencies. I'm not going to these high-rise buildings downtown Birmingham to see whatever. I try to avoid that stuff as much as possible. Some people can't. I get that. But you've got to not, they don't want you to take care of yourself. We used to call it Big Brother. We have institutionalized every single part of our lives. When I was a kid, the same person, the same doctor that birthed me from my mother took care of me through all my years, all through to early adulthood. We had one doctor. We didn't have all these specialists, Anything wrong, we went to this one doctor. We had little Hot Wheel metal cars that had lead paint on it. What gave us the cancers? It wasn't the lead paint. What gave us the cancers was the atmosphere. These companies, these large corporations spewing this shit in the air. All right, I'm getting sidetracked with that. There's no doubt about that. So we're getting close to the end of this, and I appreciate everybody. This has been a new subject, conspiracy theories, what's going on with this. I'm not saying ignore the coronavirus, but I'm saying we've got other things that we have just normalized that's worse than the virus. Can't talk. So that's something that we need to sit back and think about for sure. Now I'm adding here, let me add. Come on. Well, it's not exactly the way I want to do it. How'd that work? Right there? There we go. That'll work. Now, if you watch that last video, how affordable was medical care? Okay, so Doc Connector asked me how affordable medical. It wasn't thought of. My father was a vacuum salesman and a small town preacher. A lot of people back in those days didn't have health insurance. We didn't have 401ks, all that stuff. You know, my father was raised without even having credit cards and debit cards and all that stuff. We didn't have all that security blanket. We paid our doctor, and the full bill for going to a doctor's office is maybe $15-20. You go get a shot, whatever. It's like, this is what it was. It's gotten out of hand now, and I don't want to get too far off into that. I'm just saying that whatever the cost of medical care, the key to it is to avoid it, to avoid big pharma to the best of your ability. Once you get in that system, you are screwed. Everybody I know that's got involved in that system, and believe me, I understand some people have genetic issues and whatnot. They can't avoid it for quality of life and for staying alive. They can't avoid it. I get that. But the normal person, we've gotten in the habit of running to the doctor for every little thing. We've got most people have this insurance and they run, oh, I got a hangnail and I run to the doctor and just sniffle and all this stuff. And of course, now the schools won't let you take a kid out of school without getting a doctor's note. We've given up our freedoms totally. Okay, enough of that rant. In the last video that I played, you'll notice that in that bag that that you saw in that video, they had a book. And that book covered that one basic subject, and they had it in a Ziploc bag. This is the purpose of me putting together this book that you see there. It's on Amazon. And let me also apply the link to that. I'm sorry, I'm going to shamelessly promote this book because I'm telling you, the infrastructure is very fragile. It could easily break down. Trust me. If you think it couldn't, you're blinding yourself to reality. So the bottom line is that you need to be prepared in a practical way. It's not a matter of living in great fear. I like to say, and as I say on the cover of this book here, it's not a question of if there'll be a tornado. It's not a question of if there'll be a hurricane. It's not a question of if there'll be another disease. It's only a question of when and where these things will occur. It's that simple. When and where will these things occur? So given that, practical preparedness. And this is in this inexpensive book form, less prime, $14.50. It's a lot of packed full of information, just practical stuff, not telling you to dig a cave in your backyard and all that kind of stuff. This is very practical stuff. So, there's been blackouts. The infrastructure is teetering. We have not invested in this country in our infrastructure in forever. We're way behind. Our bridges are falling apart. It's a very fragile system. Any one thing could, even in a localized area, create a situation that that could be life-threatening. It could certainly affect your quality of life dramatically. So we've gotten used to the internet and our smartphones. We can, let me Google that and let me search, and I can get that answer, and I can find out how to do that. Let me find that YouTube video and blah blah blah. Guess what? This can go out. And don't think that you can't live without this. I spent the first half of my life at least without any of these gadgets. This, what I'm doing now, this is fantastic. When I was a kid, this was science fiction. Really. This was Star Trek, the little communicator. This has more. My first computer was a Radio Shack Model 1. Give me a break. But this can go away. Don't think you can't survive without all this, because you can. The problem is you got to know how to survive, and we don't train for that. And this is where we're failing. For thousands of years, humans survived to get us to this point without all this stuff. Just 200 years ago, what I'm dealing with here on my desk, communicating with people, some I know and some I don't know via this technology, I would have been a god. This is a miracle. This is magic. We survived for thousands and thousands and thousands of years without any of this stuff, because we came from the earth. All this stuff came from the earth. None of this stuff came miraculously by any god or gods. We manipulated the earth to build this stuff. And we survived without ever reaching this. We rode on horseback, we walked, all these things. We survived. Yes, there were issues, but guess what? There are issues today. I have a lot of millennials. They'll come up to me and they'll say words like, man, we are certainly humans, we've gone to shit. Well, have you studied history? We've always been shit. Have you heard of the Inquisition? I mean, come on, study history. This is nothing new. The only thing that's new is the technology. We communicate in a different fashion. We have transportations in a different fashion, but don't think any of this is new. It's sad that we have to even have a book like I'm promoting here. It's sad, but we kind of have to, because we've lost touch with our planet. We've lost touch with life. Really, with life, we've lost touch. And so that's the point I'm trying to make here. I thank all of you. 2 hours. Can you believe that? We've been doing this stuff for 2 hours, and I could go on and on, but Dot Connector, thank you very much. Carl, Catherine, all you guys that's joined me here. I hope that there was something beneficial that came from all this 2 hours of stuff going on here. Ramona, Kelly, Laura, all you guys, thank you so much. Spread this. If you think there's anything of value that took place here tonight, share it. Please don't hesitate. I really appreciate it. Let me get ready to shut this down. The 2 hours is coming to a close. There is the book that ties in with the subject matter tonight. Yes, all this information is available on the internet. No doubt about it. But what are you going to do if the infrastructure breaks down? There's no longer any internet. There's no longer any electricity. $15, $14.50 is a small investment to have some practical stuff in front of you. Get the book, put it in a Ziploc bag, so protect it from moisture and whatever. So you got a little reference book. I'm also coming out, and getting the information together is one thing, and then formatting it to where it fits in a book properly, the margins and everything else is another thing. So I'm working on the next one, which will be a companion book to this. That'll be out shortly. It's called Practical Defense. Now, personally, I believe in doing our utmost to use non-lethal force at all, to the best of our ability. don't jump out with that Rambo kill 'em mentality and make mistakes. And this is where even our police today have just got it all screwed up, in my opinion. They're just too quick, and we don't think. We're afraid. Don't live in fear, but be ready, be prepared, because it's not a question of if, it's only a question of when. Hopefully, it won't happen to you or I. But the fact is, it's going to happen to somebody. It's going to happen to a lot of somebodies. So be prepared for that. Join us. If you hadn't joined us, go over to Facebook. Join us on Abnormal Alabama. We've got a nice group there. If you haven't subscribed to my channel on YouTube, it's Abnormal Alabama on YouTube. And we talk about a lot of weird stuff. We have a lot of fun. And then we do this kind of stuff too. If you missed the entire show, I talked a lot about conspiracy fact, not just conspiracy theory. So if you didn't get a chance to watch this entire program tonight, do so. My time is up. Peace and love. Have a good night.